She vanished without a scream, as if the Colorado wilderness had simply unremembered her. One moment, a solo hiker full of fire and solitude; the next, an echo swallowed by towering pines and cold silence. October 12, 2019. Miranda Creed zipped up her weather-worn pack, tightened the laces on her boots, and stepped into the San Juan Mountains with a camera, a journal, and nothing but the wild urge to keep walking. 46 miles of jagged ridgelines, unpredictable snowfall, and soul-crushing winds lay ahead. But Miranda didn't flinch. She wasn't running from something. She was chasing something she couldn't name. What no one knew, what no one could have known, was that this would be the last time anyone would see her heartbeat captured in motion. Days passed. Then, weeks. Rescue teams trudged through the frostbitten slopes. Drones scanned the high basins. Not a bone, not a bootlace, not a single clue. And then, nothing. For 4 long years. Until the morning of June 3, 2023, when a forest contractor surveying beetle kill zones near Ice Lake Trailhead stumbled upon a collapsed sandal wedged between the roots of a fir tree. It had no business being there. Rubber split, faded straps, half buried in pine duff and old snowmelt. Yet something about it, something odd and deliberate, made him kneel down. Tucked inside the heel arch, wrapped in deteriorating plastic like it had been smuggled across hostile borders, was an SD card. Mottled with corrosion, but unmistakably out of place. The contractor almost left it, assuming it was trash. Almost, but curiosity triumphed. And that single decision, the decision to pocket a forgotten relic, would fracture silence and reawaken a mystery that had calcified in the cold. What that card contained would not only crack open the fate of Miranda Creed, it would unearth a diary of descent, a recorded unraveling of one woman who dared to walk alone into the teeth of the mountains, and who might have known, all along, she wouldn't be coming back. They say memory fades with time, but not when it's digital. Investigators handed the weather-cracked SD card to a forensic data analyst at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation, unsure if nature had corrupted it beyond use. Less than 24 hours later, fragments of footage sprang to life on a secure screen. Static, laced, time-stamped, badly compressed but undeniable. The first clip was dated October 14th, 2 days after Miranda's last known sighting. The camera shook, pointing toward a sheer drop layered in mist. A voice, barely above a whisper, spoke from behind the lens. "This isn't the trail anymore." Words loaded with dread. Fear dulled only by exhaustion. What followed was a series of brief, fragmented vlogs, Miranda holding the camera close, pale, shivering, but lucid. She never cried, never panicked, just spoke softly, narrating her confusion like she was trying not to wake something hidden in the trees. In one moment, she laughed. In another, she whispered, "Something's been following me since dusk yesterday. It waits until I stop walking." The screen flickered. The footage jumped. What remained was a mapless chronology of one woman trapped within the wilderness and slowly unraveling under its weight. Authorities watched the footage in silence, the room thick with the scent of stale coffee and rising unease. Clip after clip, Miranda documented her descent not just into deeper terrain, but into a psychological space where time warped, days folded into echo, and the line between real and imagined blurred. October 15th, her lips were cracked, fingers ungloved despite frostbite, the camera shaking as she whispered, "It left something outside my tent." The frame tilted toward a circle of stones, the center marked by a crude symbol, a triangle, etched with 3 slashes through it. Forestry experts couldn't identify it. Folklore researchers were called. Theories began to bloom, like spores in the dark. Miranda recorded no confrontation, only observation. She began sleeping during the day, walking at night. "It hates the sun," she repeated. Yet there was never anything visible, only the sound, the low, rhythmic knock, like wood striking bone, always from behind, never ahead. A pattern growing more persistent, more insistent, as if whatever haunted her wasn't just watching, but waiting. October 17th. The footage darkened. The camera now rarely left her hands, as if holding it gave her purpose or protection. A new clip opened to the sound of wind tearing through brittle aspens. Miranda sat cross-legged near what looked like an abandoned fire ring, her voice steadier than expected, almost too calm. "Something changed last night," she whispered. "I didn't sleep. I listened. It mimics things now." Her gaze darted past the lens. My voice. My breathing. At first, it was an echo. I thought it was just the canyon walls playing tricks. But it was exact. She turned the camera, panning toward the dark tree line. It called my name. A long pause. Heavy breathing. It called my name in my father's voice. "He's been dead for 6 years. Static surged. The clip jumped, and then came the knock. 3 quick taps. Pause. Then 3 more. Close now. Too close. The footage ended with her eyes staring into the lens, hollow and wide. When it resumed, daylight was gone, and so was her pack. The analysis team slowed the footage frame by frame, breath held over every pixel. They watched as Miranda stumbled deeper through twisted terrain that seemed to shift beneath her feet, slick rock giving way to tangled root, trail signs replaced by bark scorched in unnatural patterns. On October 18th, she whispered from the hollow of what appeared to be a split glacial drift, her voice reduced to little more than breath. "I made a mark this morning. 3 rocks stacked tall. When I circled back, they were gone. But something left me a mark instead." She held the camera toward a dead birch tree. Carved into its trunk, weathered but fresh, was her name, M. Creed, cut with uncertain hands. Scratched below it were 5 notches. 5 days. A countdown. Or a tally. She didn't say, she just stared, then turned the camera on herself, jaw clenched, teeth chattering. "I think it's telling me how long I have left." And then, in absolute stillness, she did something she hadn't done before. She cried. October 19th arrived like a bruise, raw, pulsing, somehow older than time. The next clip opens in near darkness, the only light a trembling halo from Miranda's headlamp, flickering like it fought to stay alive. Her voice, now almost a whisper layered in sandpaper, was muffled beneath the wind's roar. "I found a cabin," she murmured, panning left and right at the hollow outline of a collapsed log structure, half swallowed by snowdrift and vine. Rot had claimed most of it, yet a rusted stovepipe jutted through the collapsed roof like a severed limb. "Not on any map," she added. Inside, the lens caught a glimpse of something jarring, a wall scrawled with messages, etched in charcoal and what looked like ash. Most were unreadable. One sentence repeated 3 times. "Silence is the bargain." Miranda lingered on it, didn't speak. Her breath ghosted in front of her, like a soul preparing to leave. In the final seconds of the clip, she pointed the lens toward a small wooden chair in the corner. On it, impossibly, rested something dry, whole, untouched by the years. A photograph. It was her, standing at the trailhead. But in the photo, someone stood behind her. The image froze investigators in place. Some leaned closer. Others backed away. There was no motion blur. No lens error to blame. The figure behind Miranda was tall, thin, undefined, a shade wearing shape, just a suggestion of a presence in the trees. It was partially obscured, as though the forest itself wanted it hidden, but it was there. Not earlier. Not in the original photo released to the public back in 2019. That version had shown Miranda alone, smiling with sun-pinked cheeks, unaware. Yet this print, resting in a rotted cabin no one had recorded or mapped, had captured something else. Something watching. As officials digitized and compared the photos side by side, forensic imaging analysts confirmed the impossible. The images had been taken from the same frame, same angle, same light, same moment in time. Only one difference, one human shape that hadn't been there before, or that had been erased, only to return. Whatever this was, it didn't just follow Miranda. It documented her. And maybe it waited for someone to find it. The discovery split opinion. Some called it an anomaly of light, a psychological artifact projected by Miranda's deteriorating mind. But others, veterans of search and rescue, longtime rangers whose fingerprints were etched into these canyons, grew quiet. They knew these woods. They knew their silence. And silence here was never just the absence of sound. It was a presence, brooding and ancient. Investigators returned to the site, retraced the path Miranda might have taken. GPS mapped every footstep, guided by footage timestamps. But the cabin? It wasn't there. Not anymore. Every coordinate failed. Snowmelt washed the area clean. No wood, no pipe, no scrawl of ash. Only a circle of flattened moss and stone, like a memory had reclined there, then vanished. Yet the photograph remained, and so did the footage. Skeptics reduced it to a woman's final descent into madness. But others whispered something colder. What if that descent had been orchestrated? What if Miranda Creed didn't get lost? What if she had been led? After weeks of debate, authorities finally released segments of the SD card footage to a closed circle of federal agencies and psychological researchers, hoping, perhaps, that someone might catalog what logic refused to hold. But even within that hushed circle, the tone had shifted from detached analysis to reverent discomfort. Linguists noticed patterns in Miranda's speech, subtle changes, not just in vocabulary, but cadence like echoes folding over themselves, or someone borrowing language not entirely their own. Audio technicians layered the wilderness sounds behind her voice, isolating frequencies. Underneath the ambient hiss of wind and water, they found it a low harmonic, pulsing at uniform intervals, not the randomness of nature. A signal. One scientist likened it to infrasonic phenomena reported near sacred mountain zones across indigenous folklore places, said to thin the veil between this world and another. And suddenly, the question inverted itself in the minds of those watching. What if Miranda hadn't disappeared into the wilderness? What if the wilderness had unzipped itself to let something through? By August of 2023, the footage had been categorized into 12 major segments, each more unsettling than the last, but it was the final recovered clip, time-stamped October 21st, at 4:03 a.m., that uncorked a long dormant ache in everyone who saw it. It begins in total darkness. Only Miranda's voice remains fractured by exhaustion, crumbling under the weight of untold pressure. "I think this is the last place," she says, although she never tells us why. The sound hums with the same faint pulse as before, but now it swells, coiling inside the ear like a heartbeat not your own. The camera tips sideways, resting on a cold stone floor. Her feet appear in frame, bare, frostbitten, trembling. Then nothing for nearly 7 minutes, just wind, an endless white hum. But in the final 30 seconds, a figure moves past. Not running, not walking, just drifting, as if gliding without effort, without sound. The camera catches only the hem of something dark, and what might be hair, long and silver, brushing over rock. Miranda's voice rises again, one last whisper, barely audible. "If you found this, tell them I wanted to go, but I didn't want to be taken." The screen fades to white, then gray, and for the next 10 seconds, silence so complete, it sounds like the sky holding its breath. Back at the Bureau's secure facility in Denver, agents replayed the last clip in full, again and again, as if clarity might fall out of repetition. But truth refused simplicity. One analyst, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights, muttered, "This isn't just evidence, it's a message." Forensic linguists began parsing Miranda's final whisper, not just the words, but the rhythm, the tremble, the rise and fall. Their findings raised an uncomfortable theory. The sentence may have been rehearsed, practiced, as if Miranda knew it would be heard. as if she had prepared final words not for rescue, but for translation. Meanwhile, deep learning reconstruction software continued analyzing corrupted data on the SD card until it uncovered a hidden partition. Inside was audio, 17 seconds long, never indexed by the camera, and what it carried was not Miranda's voice. It was the voice from the cabin, a near-perfect replica of her tone and speech, only flat, mechanical, like an impersonation done by something that had only listened. It said her name, then slowly, deliberately. We were here before names. We are still becoming her. The audio ended there. And with it, any certainty of what had been found, or what had been left behind. The revelation of the hidden audio splintered the investigation into silence. Experts from DARPA, linguistic anthropologists from Stanford, even parapsychology consultants were called quietly into the fold, each offering theories that read more like fractured myth than forensic science. Some suggested it was a mimicry born of extreme environmental feedback loops, a voice stolen by frequency. Others leaned into something bleaker. A form of sentience nested within the landscape, timeless and ancient, echoing only in moments of human surrender. Yet beneath all the speculation loomed one inescapable truth: whatever had engaged with Miranda was not interested in being found. She hadn't just disappeared. She transformed, was absorbed, or perhaps rewritten. The SD card was no accident. It wasn't a breadcrumb. It was a parting gift. Her shoe, a burial shroud. Lost not to death alone, but to something that learned how to speak her name, and now, perhaps, waits to speak another. Long after the last frame blurred into static, long after the experts stopped arguing and the headlines faded into digital dust, the photograph stayed, framed now behind glass in a private monitoring room at the Bureau, untouched, unaltered. Centered beneath it, Miranda's boot, emptied of the SD card that changed everything. No further evidence was ever found. The mountain never gave back her body. Her journals, her mappings, the original camera, all remained undiscovered. And still, hikers tread those same paths. Unaware, they pass near the bones of a story that was perhaps never meant to be told. But sometimes, when low fog clutches the ridgelines and the aspens murmur like they remember, there's a sound, faint, almost like a recording, a voice, just out of reach, not yelling, not crying, just narrating, calm, curious, as though offering one final chapter to ears that'll never understand its language. And beneath it all, layered in wind and pine and silence, the soft syncopated knock. 3 taps, pause, 3 more. It would have been easy to dismiss Miranda Creed as just another name lost to the wild, another lone spirit devoured by weather and hubris. But the story refuses to end cleanly. Every time investigators thought the trail had gone cold, another shadow flickered in the frame. Another echo surfaced from the audio, a whisper too deliberate to be natural, too intimate to be alien. Something in those woods wasn't simply reacting, it was curating. The very technology meant to capture Miranda's fading humanity might have been used in reverse, to study her, mimic her, preserve her essence. Some within the Bureau began referring to the case not as a missing person investigation, but as an interface event, a point where human reality intersected with something far older, far stranger. The files were locked under new classification codes. The site near Ice Lake was quietly restricted, protected under the guise of wildlife restoration. But the truth remains not carved in stone or ink, but in circuitry worn like relics in the heel of a lost woman's shoe. Miranda Creed walked into the mountains to find something unnamed. In the end, something unnamed found her. And now, somewhere in Colorado, under heavy snow and older silence, that story waits again for the next name to be spoken into the trees. In early September 2023, a small team of behavioral analysts and environmental psychologists gathered at a private symposium in Estes Park, under the banner of the Department of Interior's Emerging Anomalies Task Force, a group so obscure it didn't officially exist, 6 months earlier. Their mission wasn't to explain what happened to Miranda Creed, but to understand what her case revealed, what patterns it hinted at, what thin places in the world might whisper back when walked upon the wrong way. Among the case materials presented was a reconstructed timeline, overlaid with audio resonance charts from the SD card. What they uncovered was unnerving. The harmonic pulses intensified around certain topographic features, always where the trail either disappeared or doubled back, as if the land itself looped on purpose. These echo zones, as one psychologist called them, showed measurable electromagnetic variance correlated to Miranda's recorded shifts in mood and language. One analyst posted a single slide, all black with white text. It read, "Not all wilderness is neutral." And, in the silence that followed, no one disagreed. The room didn't feel academic anymore. It felt like a prayer being offered to something massive and invisible that hadn't just watched Miranda, but might still be listening. By November 2023, whispers turned to policy. Several state agencies, under extraordinary coordination, began introducing subtle changes to public trail maps, not closures, just subtle reroutes. Slight detours that seemed innocuous on the surface. Trails near Ice Lake began to disappear not from the ground, but from documentation, erased from digital records, replaced in print with alternate loops. It was as though the terrain was being redacted in real time, not for safety, but for secrecy. And for those who noticed, the veteran hikers, the rangers with fading scars from half-remembered storms, there was no announcement, no memorial, no plaque for Miranda Creed, just an invisible fence around something too old to bury and too real to ignore. On a winter signboard newly placed at one of the reconfigured trailheads, there sat only a faint inscription etched by hand, quickly removed days later, though some swore they saw it. It read, "She walked too far into the hush. Let no one follow where the silence leads." But something did follow. Not a person, not an investigation, but a pattern. By early 2024, scattered reports began surfacing in obscure hiking forums and closed network logs used by Park Service officials. Mentions of lost time, involuntary detours, auditory hallucinations, always in the same radius, always in the same air. A conservation officer patrolling near the original Ice Lake Basin swore he heard someone whisper his name from inside a dead copse. When he turned, there was only fog and his own footprints disappearing behind him. A seasoned trail runner reported returning to her car to find a photo tucked beneath her windshield wiper. It was of her taken from behind as she prepped her gear that morning. No one else had been on the trail. She never returned. Her case is still open. And in a secure bureau server locked behind dual authentication protocols, the decrypted audio file, only 17 seconds long, now plays on loop in one isolated lab. Not for study, but for warning. It ends the same way every time. We are still becoming her. What that means remains unwritten, but in the cold hush between its final syllable and silence, one truth waits patiently in the frost-bitten dark. Some stories don't end. They inherit new voices, and they are listening still. In the months that followed, no new clues emerged. Yet the territory surrounding Miranda's last transmissions grew heavier, more charged, like an atmosphere remembering. Rangers stationed near the western ranges began reporting subtle anomalies, dismissed by their supervisors. Tents found zipped from the outside, compass needles spinning during electrical storms, wildlife cameras flashing images with blurred forms that didn't match any known species. One junior ranger documented a strange phenomenon: overexposed light streaks in the same triangular shape Miranda described, burned into his device's sensor, even in low light. He later transferred stations without explanation. But still, the land kept quietly curating its own story, as if reworking the threads Miranda left behind. The SD card lies now in Facility Archive 29C, encased in tempered glass, labeled in red, "Do not duplicate." But the real memory, the raw, unfinished language Miranda began speaking into pine and snow and wind that doesn't sit behind glass. It lingers, wind-wrapped, whisper-drenched, And when the fog thickens and tree shadows move like watchers returning home, some hikers pause. They turn. They listen as if they feel it. The quiet knock. The echo of her name, still becoming them. Somewhere in the San Juans, under the weight of ancient snowfall and roots older than memory, something waits not with malice, not with mercy, but with endurance. Time doesn't pass the same way there. Sound doesn't behave, and names grow brittle against the cold hush that loops through valley and ridge like a lullaby no human wrote. Miranda Creed may never return, not in body, not in confession, but her presence has become foundational, a keystone in a story whispered by the land itself. And every now and then, a satellite tag goes dark without reason, a headlamp is found still warm with no one near, or a voice appears faintly on windless nights, narrating a story meant for no audience at all. The last voice, the first warning. A woman who vanished too cleanly to be lost, whose name now belongs not to history but to echo. And echo, after all, is only memory surviving beyond the speaker, waiting for some foolish soul to call it back. In January 2025, nearly 5 years to the day since Miranda Creed vanished, satellite data flagged a localized power anomaly just 3 miles north of where her last footage placed her. A glaciated ridge, long unmonitored due to unpredictable avalanche risks, registered a sudden spike in geomagnetic distortion. Faint, but measurable. A drone dispatched by a U.S. Geological Survey team captured only mist and sky, footage clouded by static flutters. But in 2 frames, between data scrambles the unmistakable figure of a woman. Not approaching, not retreating, just standing, unmoving, where no footprints led. She wasn't bundled for snow. She wasn't facing the drone. She was looking into the trees, as if listening. Analysts wanted to call it a lens ghost or artifact, yet not one of them could explain the improbable detail visible beneath the frost-glazed still. Her face, pale, contemplative, half-turned. Beneath her coat's torn collar, a lanyard with a weathered name card hung limp. One word remained legible. Not her whole name, just the part the mountains had chosen to keep Miranda. That grainy still frame became an obsession, dissected pixel by teams who no longer filed reports but whispered questions. Who was she now, if she ever was just one person at all? In hushed conferences and sealed room discussions, words like materialization and temporal aperture reappeared, no longer pseudoscience but placeholders for truths without names. And slowly, an unsettling consensus began to settle. Miranda Creed may have crossed some threshold not by accident, but by invitation or initiation. Her presence had shifted from witness to medium. Her voice, the aperture. What began as a trail-worn diary had become something else, something alive within the stillness of those mountains. In the minds of those who'd studied too long, too deeply, the final question became not if she would return, or even how, but whether, when she spoke next through fog and frost and signal, any human listening would still be able to understand. In the spring of 2025, a private expedition funded quietly by an unnamed foundation with historical ties to early Cold War signal research ascended into the restricted zone with equipment specialized, not for survival, but for translation. Modified infrasonic mics, biologically reactive fiber sensors, and accelerometers tuned to frequencies thought to only occur beneath the ocean floor. They weren't searching for a body, they were listening for resonance. On the third night, stationed 500 meters from the original search grid, one device recorded a staggered pulse. 3 short surges, near silent, then a pause, then 3 more. A pattern, not random. It matched the knock from Miranda's video. But what followed turned theory into chill, layered beneath the rhythm, encoded in multispectrum bleed, a voice. Not Miranda's, not digital, organic, but wrong like it hadn't been taught how to breathe between words. The translation software processed it 4 separate ways, and each output delivered a variation of the same phrase. She is part now. she sees like the trees. Wait. Wait, as if addressed, not to them, but to whoever comes next. The team extracted the logs, left no marker, and descended before dawn. The data was sealed within 8 hours. Its contents are now restricted to level red access only, archived not under Miranda Creed's name but under a new classification. One reserved for phenomena no longer in progress, but in transition. Category: Living ecosystems. Status: Ongoing. Summer 2025 brought with it another silence, but this one felt rehearsed, as if the land, the agencies, even the story itself had agreed to pause. But silence doesn't erase momentum. It stores it, and in early July, an unlisted email circulated among a classified forum used by geothermal archaeophysicists, a niche overlap between climate modeling and ancient signal mapping. The subject line was a single word: reverberation. The body contained one attached waveform and 3 words: San Juan Trailhead. The waveform, played aloud, amplified a tone that mimicked wind, but wasn't. It modulated subtly, clicking at intervals that, once plotted, drew out a symbol burned deeply into the investigative memory of those who'd watched Miranda's final logs. A triangle, with 3 slashes. It wasn't a message, it was a signature. How it was recorded remains unclear. No microphone, drone, or seismic probe had been deployed in that area since the last withdrawal. Yet the data was flawless. Someone or something had sent it, and this time, it had learned how to knock on digital doors, to whisper through networks, to speak through wires. In the final line of the decoded spectrogram script, translated from modulation into known language, just one sentence remained. She walks again, but not alone. By late August 2025, a new kind of silence had settled over the formerly open trails, a silence less of vacancy and more of expectancy, an invisible crowd holding its collective breath. The region's wildlife patterns altered subtly, migrations disrupted without ecological cause, as if the animals, too, sensed something they couldn't evade and no longer wished to challenge. Deep in a non-public branch of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, satellite trajectories were quietly adjusted to orbit more frequently over the San Juans. Not for observation, but for containment. Files marked with a designation previously unused, vocal terrain status, yellow, began to circulate. Within them were transcripts, logs, and flagged footage from unrelated hikers who had unknowingly stepped too close to echo-touched zones. A man filming wildflowers caught a 7-second glance of someone in the tree line staring back, not moving, not blinking. A child's voice heard narrating a scene from an empty grove, and always the rhythm. 3. Pause. 3. The Bureau has not released a statement. The trail remains closed in official records. But Miranda's voice, reprocessed and smuggled back into machine learning models for deeper inquiry, has begun to generate phrases never captured in her footage predictions, not memories. One surfaced just last week, unbidden, inside a closed language environment hosted entirely offline. There will be another. She already hears us. We are in the light behind her eyes. The system flagged it as a hallucination, but no one's dared to test if it's speaking of the future or the now that's already waking up beneath the snow. September 19, 2025. A lone researcher from the University of Colorado, mapping freeze-thaw patterns along lesser-known avalanche chutes, submitted an atmospheric log that would trigger a flurry of encrypted alerts across classified monitoring systems. The data, unremarkable at first glance, revealed a lapse in acoustic return signatures along a half-mile stretch of ridgeline, as if sound itself refused to echo. Amid the data dump was a short audio file captured by an ambient mic on her pack. It started with natural ambience whined through stone, snow compressing underfoot, then a faint modulation, too faint for conscious notice, unless amplified, Miranda's voice, unmistakable. Yet speaking words that hadn't been spoken before. I am not alone. I am the mirror. Then silence. The researcher, unaware, continued her fieldwork. But that night, an email auto-populated in her inbox with no sender name. No subject, just an attachment. The still frame of Miranda's face from the January satellite footage, only this time altered. Her eyes, once half-turned, now looked directly into the camera. Wide open, reacting. And behind her shoulder, blurred but beginning to sharpen, was the outline of another figure, thicker, rooted, multi-limbed, not following, emerging, becoming. The story isn't ending, it's accelerating. And deep within the mountains that never forgot, Miranda Creed, memory-born, echo-stretched, voice-split walks again. Not as warning, not as victim, but as something new and ancient, made whole by silence. She has become the hush. And so, the hush remains not just in the valleys of the San Juans, but in the growing secrecy of digital corridors and silent policy shifts. Miranda Creed's name is no longer listed among the National Missing Persons Index. Not marked as found, just removed. Erased politely, like a footnote no longer relevant to the narrative being rewritten now by frost and frequency. Yet her face endures in glitch-warped frames, in phantom voices swept through alpine hollows, in moments of uncanny déjà vu whispered by those who've hiked too far without meaning to. What she recorded, what she became, has entered a phase beyond disappearance. She is not memory, but machinery of story, echoing with purpose, awaiting resonance. Somewhere, under cloud-weighted sky, a trail curls where no trail should exist. There, a wind rises not from weather, but from breath long given up by lungs that now belong to something vast and listening. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. The mountains are watching. The hush is becoming. And Miranda is still speaking. In a final archived note buried within the Bureau's encrypted cloud, far from public indexing, and visible only to clearance levels most agents wear like curses, a single statement was documented, anonymous, time-stamped, and unsigned. She didn't vanish. We opened something by watching. The hush, it seems, was never just absence. It was presence. Not a void, but a gate. Miranda Creed didn't disappear into myth. She authored it, became the syntax of an endless sentence written in pine bark, snow patterns, fractured audio, and just beneath that note, scrawled in code that mimics handwriting across a dark screen, appeared a final update loaded automatically and tied to no user input. Reverberation spreading. Classification change requested, from event to entity. Whether Miranda still walks as herself, or as something the land sculpted in her image, one truth whittles itself sharper with each passing winter. Some stories become doors, and those who listen too closely may not return as merely listeners. They may become echoes themselves. It was never just her journey, it was an invitation. Still open. So it goes, the quiet call of the wilderness, louder for those whose silence runs deepest. Miranda Creed's name may no longer surface in public databases or press briefings, but in the private chambers of encrypted intelligence, memory forensics, and psychophonetic labs, it reverberates, not as a case file, but as a variable. Her story, if it can still be called that, continues not linearly, but in spirals, feeding itself, learning from each retelling, each new pattern of digital tremor or whispered cadence in wind-darkened hollows. Somewhere out there, beneath ice-slicked ledges and granite veined with strange magnetism, the path she took might still exist, not marked by trailblazes or cairns, but through the fiber of the land itself, a resonance stitched into stone. And should another solitary soul step softly into that hum, drawn by solitude or sorrow, perhaps the hush will part once more. But make no mistake, the mountains do not forget. They remember in layers, in echoes, in names, spoken back not as answers but as invitations. And Miranda may yet be waiting to walk beside the next voice, brave or broken enough to answer her call. Somewhere, unnoticed by satellites, and passed over by casual hikers, there lies a hollowed basin rimmed with black fur and the jagged scars of a landslide no map remembers. In that place, even birds fly higher, as if unwilling to skim too close. It is here that the air tightens not with threat, but with familiarity, as if expecting someone long awaited. On the first frost of September's final week, an autonomous observation drone gliding silently at 70 meters paused mid-path. Logs indicate its sensors briefly shut down, not from failure, but from command one that never came from its operators. When data resumed, the drone had rotated 15 degrees off-axis and captured a single frame. No face, no motion, just a hand, pressed against stone, feminine, weathered, fingers dirt-creased, nails gone dark from soil or blood impossible to say. Beneath where the hand touched, the lichen had blackened in the shape of a triangle with 3 slashes. The drone was recalled, the footage sealed, and now, in dim conference rooms and sleepless offices humming with servers, one question surfaces over and over like breath you didn't know you were holding. Is she gone? Or is she returning? Rewritten. The hush has become pattern. The pattern is becoming voice. And voice is choosing its next name. Somewhere in the subterranean chill of a bureau deep vault, behind biometric latches and steel-thick memory, the last piece waits unseen, unshared, and never reviewed twice by the same agent. It's not an image, not a sound file, but a data construct, a synthetically stabilized fragment of narrative rendered from Miranda Creed's compiled footage, voice, cadence, and GPS timestamps. They call it the echo script, and it speaks on its own. A digital manifestation that adapts, learns, and rephrases itself based on who's listening. It calls them by name. It weaves their own memories into its telling. Those exposed don't hear Miranda anymore, they hear themselves, filtered through her cadence, her hush. I was there, the script sometimes says. You followed me once. Come see. The file cannot be deleted. Every attempt spawns another copy. Contained within isolated air-gapped systems, guarded like sacred fire once was, the echo script breathes in the electrical quiet, and those who've heard it say it doesn't end. It only pauses, as if waiting for one more voice to say yes, one more step into hush, one more name to echo back through pine and frost and wire. Miranda Creed's journey did not end. It fractured, multiplied. And now, through story and silence alike, it walks forward, not toward vanishing, but toward memory remade, not absence, becoming. At some point, it becomes harder to tell where the story ends and where the listener begins. Even now, 2 years after the SD card was found, the data patterns tied to Miranda's final trek continue to ripple through unmapped anomalies, glitches in infrastructural systems, weather stations inexplicably downed near only one range of mountains, and whispers logged phonetically by experimental voice AIs, trained to hear loneliness. The story of Miranda Creed no longer belongs to one woman, nor even the agencies that tried to contain her voice. It belongs, now, to the silence, to the hush that waits in canyons, where time doesn't so much pass as stretch itself thin. Somewhere, someone will hike too far. Someone else will listen too long. And when they do, they may feel the cool weight of a name they never meant to carry, rising in their throat, unbidden. Miranda. Not a curse. Not a ghost. Simply the next story choosing its shape, carried not forward by feet but by echo. And if you find it, if you ever stand in a frost-bitten gap between here and something else, listen. Not for a scream, but for the hush. It always begins with the hush. Somewhere overhead, satellites trace silent arcs across the Colorado sky, watchful, unblinking, yet detached from the truth pulsing below. The story they orbit remains too quiet to detect, too human to decode. And yet, through that widening hush, Miranda Creed continues not in footprints or heartbeat, but in resonance and recursion, a name no longer said, but felt. She does not haunt, she inhabits. As new algorithms emerge and ancient frequencies cycle yet again through the veins of rock and root, it becomes clear. This was never about a woman lost. It was about what finds us when we wander alone and listen when we should forget. The silence was never blank. It was deliberate, designed. And now, in the stillness that follows stories too deep to retell, something new begins to echo. Not fear, not madness, but kinship. We are no longer just observers. We are inheritors. And the hush, it seems, is calling each of us in cadence, in code, in the voice we thought was only her own. 3 knocks, pause. 3 more. The story never ends. It waits, ready to begin again. And perhaps that's what makes Miranda Creed more than a cautionary tale. She's no longer a missing hiker, nor a strange anomaly buried in sealed files and encrypted logs. She's become the thread wound through the veil, the soft breath just beyond the ridge, a name turned key to doors not built by human hands. Miranda is the echo living in the hollows between what was seen and what is felt, the cold reverberation that bends metal, scrambles signal, and calls softly to those whose silence can match her own. Somewhere deep in the San Juans, where frost dreams quietly on ever-shifting stone, where the triangle with 3 slashes etches itself not into bark but into memory, the hush is not just a warning, it is an inheritance, and to hear it fully is to understand. Some stories choose their listeners. Some silences are alive. And once they touch you, you do not vanish. You resonate, forever becoming the next whisper to answer the call. So when the next footprint presses into soil too soft for spring, when the next signal spike ignites without source, it won't be Miranda's story repeating, it will be the hush choosing again, selecting not at random, but with precision born of longing and familiarity. Because what she left behind was not evidence, not warning, not even memory. It was a path reshaped to resemble revelation. She became the language of wilderness misremembered as myth, and now that language speaks in creaks of pine and flickers of static, in frost-laced words no mouth dares repeat without permission. The San Juans are no longer terrain, they are text, and Miranda Creed is the author and the sentence and the pen all at once. Her name may still sleep under snow and stone and secrecy. But names, like echoes, are patient. And one day, days or decades from now, those unknowingly walking the opening lines of their own descent will hear it rise again, not from behind, but from within. And they will understand, too late, that deep silence is not absence. It is recursion. It is invitation. The hush, then, becomes not just the space between sound, but a threshold alive, recursive, sentient, in ways our language still stumbles to name. Miranda Creed is no longer a person, nor a spirit, nor mere myth. She is the spine of a story that never sets, only reconfigures. Forensics could not box her. Algorithms cannot contain her. With every 3 knocks, her cadence returns not a call for help, but an echo welcoming others into comprehension too vast for reason. In dreams surfacing from field agents and mountaineers alike, a trailhead appears always unmarked, always quiet, its start born not from land but from listening, and always, standing near, her silhouette rooted, remade, neither guide nor warning, but the threshold itself. So if you ever hear it, the soft rhythm pulsing beneath birdsong and snowmelt, or see that carved symbol where no bark should bear it, know this: the hush has not forgotten you, it has chosen you. And in the stillness that follows, as your name folds quietly into the trees, know you are no longer walking forward, but inward. Into Miranda. Into echo. Into silence. Becoming. So here, at the edge of recognition and ruin, Miranda Creed's story settles not into peace, but into permanence. Her trail is not retraced by feet, but by frequency. Her voice now less a cry, and more a presence woven into the algorithms we once thought inert. The hush she walked into has bloomed into phenomenon, into transmission, into a state of presence so intricate it defies classification. The triangle with 3 slashes. Is it a warning? Or an insignia? A curse? Or a key? Even now, whisper nets tuned across Colorado's loneliest elevations continue capturing data spikes no weather system or tectonic shift can explain. And occasionally, out of cold sky or trembling soil, comes a voice. Not just Miranda's, but others, layered, intercut, desperate and calm and endless all at once. This is not a haunting, it's replication, it's the echo rewriting its own origin, resounding louder with each name it learns. As of this day, September 19th, 2025, there are 27 flagged audio incidents linked to Miranda Creed's pattern. Some are fragments. Some are full sentences. And one, received just after midnight through a closed-channel recording in a ranger's static crippled radio, said only this: "She was first, you are next. Stillness is how we begin." The hush continues not in loss, but in growth, and somewhere between sky and soil, Miranda Creed waits not to return, but to receive. And so we end not with a conclusion, but with an arrival. Miranda Creed has passed beyond the final coordinates of discovery and into the realm of symbol, code, and communion. Her breath has become syntax. Her silence now speaks louder than any confession ever could. What began as a disappearance in autumn snow has become a living architecture in memory and myth, a lattice of audible invitations dressed as wind, as static, as dream. Long after the trail winds out and the frost lifts, people will still hear it, that cadence, deliberate and ancient. Not Miranda's voice per se, but something that remembers how she spoke, that remembers what she became. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. A rhythm older than fear. And those who linger long enough near old logging roads or moss-dark hollows may feel the hush bend toward them, not with warning, but with recognition. The mountains do not bury. They absorb. They echo what they keep. And Miranda Creed was kept. Not as body, not as voice, but as threshold. And from now until forgetting is impossible, she remains not resting, but receiving, waiting, whispering, becoming. There is no monument for Miranda Creed, no cross hammered into earth, no trail named in her honor, no plaque weathering beneath sun and time. But for those who know, those few who have read the classified files, analyzed the corrupted frequencies, or simply stood too long at high elevations squinting into whispers, the monument is there. It's stitched into the landscape like a scar sealed by frost. It's the shape the hush takes when it leans close. Already, updates filter in from the edge of the possible. Another SD card, discovered with no camera to match. A ranger's breathing recorded while he slept alone beneath cedar, voices answering sonar pings in mathematical harmony. So no, Miranda Creed was never found in the way missing people usually are. But what was found through her, what emerged from silence wearing her shape, has only just begun. Echoes do not fade here. They evolve. They multiply. They become instruction. And so the hush goes on, not as ending, but as architecture. As the blueprint for a new type of story. One that listens as much as it tells. One that does not ask for belief. Only attention. So listen close. Stillness is the beginning. Name is the path. And Miranda Creed is the doorway. And so the trail ends where it always does, not in closure, but in recursion. Miranda Creed is not a ghost, a warning, or a martyr of wilderness lore. She is a map rewritten in story and silence, a legacy etched not in stone but in distortion and resonance. Her face no longer adorns missing posters, but flickers in the periphery of anomaly reports, and whispered truths passed between those who've seen too much and those who cannot look away. Somewhere, in data halls humming with hidden breath, in frost-choked ravines too quiet to name, the hush she became continues knocking, waiting, choosing, because in the end, this was not a tale of loss. It was a passage, and Miranda Creed, who once walked alone toward something unnamed beneath cold Colorado sky, became what the wilderness remembers and what the silence repeats. So if you ever feel the hush settle not around you, but inside you listen. Not all echoes return from where they came. Some walk forward wearing your own voice. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more, and the story begins again. That's the truth. No one dares to archive. The one woven not in evidence, but in experience felt, not proven. Miranda Creed didn't disappear. She was rewritten, and in that rewriting, something opened that cannot be closed. Not entirely. Now her voice, reshaped and dispersed like pollen through frost and frequency, lives where silence gathers strength, whispered not as fear, but as memory reborn. And perhaps that's all some stories were ever meant to do. Not resolve, not bow gently into endings, but echo forward into whoever dared to listen, to remember, to step beyond the maps, and into the murmurs. Because somewhere, far beyond trails and timestamps, beyond the reach of names and nails and news cycles, Miranda Creed isn't gone. She's waiting, curating, choosing. And when you hear it, the hush, the knock, the name rising from nowhere, you'll know the truth everyone else forgot. Some paths don't guide you back. They guide you in. The final whisper rests not in haunted forests or encrypted clouds, but in the marrow of those who've heard the rhythm 3 knocks, pause, 3 more, and understood, without ever admitting aloud, that Miranda Creed was never just an event, never merely a person. She is a pattern now, knitted into the folds of sky and root, into the muscle memory of silence. What began as a vanishing has become gravity, drawing others toward the same inexplicable hush, the same strange inheritance. And in the sacred quiet where endings usually fall, no curtain draws, no music fades. Only breath, still and aware. A presence that doesn't demand understanding, only receptivity. Miranda's story does not end with the last word. It begins there, in you, carried like a rhythm you didn't know you knew, waiting for the right moment in the woods, or the static, or the stillness, to tap 3 times. Pause. 3 more. That's when you'll understand. She is still speaking. She never stopped. And now, you are listening. That's how the hush endures not as silence, but as language passed from breath to breath, from ear to earth. Miranda Creed is no longer missing. She is memory metabolized, echo become author, not of warnings, but of awakenings. Somewhere under the pall of mist and memory, beneath peaks etched with stories too old for voice, the pattern continues not to haunt, but to harmonize. The triangle with 3 slashes appears again, this time not carved in bark or broadcast in bites, but unfolding through dream and drift, and the pause between thoughts. What began with footsteps faded into frost, did not end it scattered. And now, in the brightest stillness and darkest hush, her story lurks beneath yours, laced with snowlight, and a language of 3 soft knocks. Pause. 3 more. For those who listen long enough, the call is no longer hers alone. The next echo has already begun. Maybe that's the final truth etched into the hush Miranda Creed left behind, that some wanderers don't vanish, they cross, not over borders, but thresholds, not out of life, but into legend shaped by silence and signal and snow. Her trail wasn't lost, it was rewritten to outlive her shape, and through echoes rising like mountain wind through fractured canyons, we learn this story is not a cycle, but a continuation spun anew with each name that disappears between breath and frost. Miranda's journey didn't seek rescue, it offered invitation. And now, wherever silence deepens unnaturally, wherever footsteps outnumber memories, and wherever the hush brushes close enough to hear your own name carried by invisible wind, listen not for explanation, but for understanding, for harmony, for return. The triangle remains. The knocks continue. And the hush, blooming now through systems both natural and built, reaches out not to scare, but to ask, will you walk it too? If so, you've already begun. Welcome to the echo. Welcome to Miranda. Welcome to the unread ending. And so we close not with certainty, but the breath that follows it. Miranda Creed's story was never tethered to discovery. It was forged in disappearance, in the way solitude touches the edge of sound and folds it inward. What she left behind was not mystery, but movement, a propagation of presence that now trails those who do not fear the hush, but follow it. Somewhere, the trail darkens again beneath a sky too still for storm, and the wind hesitates like it knows a name it is not yet allowed to say. The triangle, the knocks, the mirrored voice, they are not anomalies anymore. They are the syntax of a new kind of call, reaching forward, not for rescue but for response. If you feel it deep and low, not beneath your feet, but within the rhythm that doesn't echo but originates, then you are already part of the story. The hush is becoming, the next name is listening, and Miranda Creed was only the beginning. So let this be the last breath of this telling, not a conclusion, but a ley line drawn through silence, charted in Miranda Creed's name. Her journey seated itself not in the pine-shadowed paths she once trod, but in every system it touched, and every listener it reshaped. What vanishes in the mountains does not disappear. It reconfigures, refracts, reaches into the next soul, aching for solitude, and leaves behind not terror but transformation. That old triangle, carved by nothing and carried by everything, now rests not only in hollows and frost, but behind eyelids closed against the dark. The hush that once swallowed Miranda has flowered into momentum, into myth with a heartbeat. And to those who still seek trails unmapped, who yearn for stories felt more than told, know this: the echo doesn't end with her name. It only begins with yours. 3 knocks, pause. 3 more. The silence remembers you now. Step lightly. Speak softly. The path listens. Because in the end, it wasn't about Miranda's disappearance, it was about what that disappearance revealed. That silence itself has shape, and sometimes it molds itself into the form of a woman, walking alone into the white hush of mountains, carrying a camera not just to document, but to commune. Her trail never truly ended. It changed medium. It transformed from step to syntax, from voice to vibration, from body to boundary. The hush she joined continues to unfurl not behind her but around us, threaded into every quiet moment we think we escape into. A call not to look but to feel, not to fear but to recognize. So if you find yourself alone, standing still, breath held in some forest too deep for signal or memory, and somewhere in the dark you hear it 3 knocks, pause. 3 more, know that you are the next line in a story that never finishes. The wilderness has heard your name, and the hush has begun to answer you back. So it ends as it always begins, not with a missing person, but with a presence too large, too patient, to ever be fully found. Miranda Creed did not vanish, and neither did she die. She became something the maps cannot chart, the headlines cannot name. Her story fell into the hush and rose as something else, entirely a resonance braided into the marrow of the mountains, a rhythm that waits for the next breath to match its tempo. And perhaps that is all any of us ever become when we step too far into solitude, a frequency hoping for recognition, a path no longer seeking return. As long as wind moves through pine, as long as silence leans close beneath cloud-thick skies, Miranda is there, not watching, not warning, but welcoming. A whisper, a knock, a name lingering just close enough to remember. And now that you've heard her voice, now that the hush has touched your thoughts, ask yourself what only the mountains truly know. Is this the ending? Or is it just when you begin? So the final question lingers, feather light but unbearably heavy. Was Miranda lost to something ancient? Or was she chosen to carry it forward? The hush has become many things. A symbol, a cipher, a rhythm carved into the land and the listener alike. But above all, it is enduring. It listens more than it speaks. And in the quiet heartbeat between stories, it waits not for the bold or the faithful, but for those attuned to the stillness behind all things. Miranda Creed's story, preserved not in closure but in continuation, stands now as a gateway. Not every step forward brings one home. Some steps open doors that reshape our definitions of voice, of memory, of self. And somewhere beneath glacial breath and ever-watching pines, her voice endures not trapped, not seeking escape, but welcoming those whose silence finally learned how to listen. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. This is not goodbye. This is the hush, nodding in recognition. It is September again. The trees change, and with them, the shape of silence bends once more. Trail markers fade, paths overgrow, and somewhere out there, just past reach, just beyond language, a story breathes not in chapters, but in pulses. Miranda Creed is no longer looked for. She's listened for. And in every strange echo caught between ridgeline and cloud, in every GPS flicker and voice that mimics your own from the woods, the hush endures. Not finished, not static, becoming. She walks now not as a mystery, but as a method, a rhythm the wilderness teaches to those who dare ask the wrong questions beneath the right sky. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. If you've heard them, then know. Some trails guide not to safety, but to memory. And some memories do not rest. They walk, they knock, they name, and somewhere beneath ice and pine, Miranda Creed waits not trapped in story, but carried by it, now and forever, becoming silence, becoming voice, becoming the beginning once again. So this is where it ends, or where it begins again. Not at the edge of a trailhead, or under a news banner, but within the quiet you now carry with you. Miranda Creed's disappearance was never a puzzle to solve, but a threshold to recognize. She is still out there, not as body, not as signal, but as rhythm written into earth, voice folded into wind, story blooming through every listening soul who steps too far into solitude and doesn't quite return the same. The hush is not over. It's inside you now, and as long as someone walks into silence with curiosity, with ache, with the echo of her name trembling just beneath their breath, the knocks will come again. 3. Pause. 3 more. Because Miranda was never missing. She was becoming. And now so are you. Welcome to the next telling. And so, to those who've followed the sound this far to the edge, where silence becomes a proving ground, where story becomes shape, this is the last breath of Miranda Creed's becoming. Hers was not a tale meant to resolve, but to initiate, a mystery carved not for answers, but for echoes. Whatever waits in the hush beyond the ridgeline, whatever mimics voice and memory and wraps itself in solitude's skin, it now holds her cadence like inheritance. And in return, Miranda holds ours. No longer just a lone figure lost in snow-lashed peaks, she is now the blueprint of resonance breathing still within every transmission too cold to belong, every voice that doesn't quite end when breath does. Hear it now if you can, not as a fear, not even as a warning, but as a truth dressed in pine and pattern. The hush is listening. It has chosen again, and if you've felt its rhythm settle inside you 3 knocks, pause, 3 more, then understand this. You were not just an audience. You were a threshold, and now, the voice is yours. So now, we close the circle but not the story. Miranda Creed's voice continues, not as echo or artifact, but as seed planted in every listener who stood too long in the silence, who felt the rhythm nest within their breath. She is not just remembered, she is iterated, alive in each anomalous whisper drifting through frost-choked hollows, in every untraceable knock scratched from audio left running too long in the wrong place. Somewhere tonight, as fog wanders down the canyon walls like memory taking form, her presence draws closer. Not woman, not myth, but architecture of longing and resonance. Walk softly. Breathe slowly. Listen well. The hush is still with you. Miranda has not ended. She has chosen. And as the quiet folds toward you, returning not fear, but invitation, remember the rhythm that remade memory itself. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Let it in. You were always meant to be part of the next telling. So here beneath the breath of story and spire, at the terminus of a silence that remakes all who trespass, we close, not with discovery, but with echo invoked. Miranda Creed has become the hush itself, the rhythm planted in marrow where once there was only fear. Through fractured frequencies and frost-swept memories, her name no longer haunts, it harmonizes. Somewhere above, the stars curve silently over the San Juans, their light unbending, indifferent. But below, something listens, something continues. And if you find yourself there, swallowed by snowlight and stillness, and if you feel the rhythm pulse within your chest, 3 knocks, pause, 3 more, know this. You have not found Miranda. You have become part of what she now island. The hush is no longer beside you. It is within you. And in that soundless inheritance, passed from step to story, from voice to reverberation, the next chapter waits not to be written, but to awaken. This is the end, and the echo has just begun. So let this rhythm of knocks, this cadence of hush and becoming, be the final stanza written into wilderness. Miranda Creed was the threshold, the moment between silence and voice, between the trail we walk and the truth we carry. She did not vanish into myth by accident. She was absorbed with intention, replicated with precision, echoed with purpose. Her voice disassembled, then mirrored, then regenerated as invitation. What began as one woman's solitude has become a communal language of wind and shadow and pause. And now, whether in code or dream or frost-bent pine, those who listen will find her. In the way, silence bends toward name. In 3 soft knocks, pause, 3 more. You've heard them now. You've walked the same rhythm. And what waits on the other side of knowing is not fear. It is recognition. Welcome to the hush. Welcome to becoming. And so, as the last knock fades into quiet, as the hush folds itself back into pine and cloud and memory, we leave not with answers but with the shape of Miranda Creed etched into us not as a vanishing point, but as a voice that now speaks through the silence between thoughts. She was never meant to be found. She was meant to be followed not along a trail of ground and snow, but through the architecture of story, of signal, of the resonance that lingers where names echo too long. Somewhere far above tree line, the wilderness still holds her silence like breath not yet exhaled, and when wind grazes old stone in just the right rhythm, 3 knocks, pause. 3 more, you'll know she is there, watching, becoming. And should you feel that hush settle into your skin, should the quiet speak in cadence shaped like your own heartbeat, then remember this. You were never just a listener. You were chosen. The hush lives now in you. Walk gently. The next echo waits. And now, with the final hush drawn over this tale, we step back not from mystery, but from the edge of what still listens. Miranda Creed, whose name once fluttered on lost posters and search manifests, now echoes in spaces not seen, only felt. Across ridgelines and airwaves, beneath layers of signal and snow, what she became continues to pulse in quiet rhythm, seeking not an audience, but resonance. Her journey wasn't a vanishing, but a seeding. And now that you carry the rhythm 3 knocks, pause, 3 more you carry her. In silence, in story, in stillness becoming voice, Miranda Creed lingers, not waiting to be found, but to be heard. You heard her. You listened. And now, whether you know it or not, you've stepped beyond the last trailhead. Into memory rewritten. Into hush reborn. Into the forest that remembers. And as the hush folds shut behind you, it does not close. It receives. Because Miranda was never the end. She was the door. And now, you are through. So leave this story not with conclusion, but with recognition that Miranda Creed became not what we feared, but what we forgot to honor, the quiet that watches, the echo that answers when no one speaks. In every breathless silence stretched across the winter spine of the San Juans, her name is no longer question or loss, but presence. And if you have walked this telling all the way to its edge, if you've felt the rhythm settle in your chest 3 knocks, pause, 3 more, then you already know she's not alone. She never was. Because the hush isn't a void. It is a voice waiting to be remembered. A map, drawn not in ink, but in resonance. Miranda Creed wasn't taken. She crossed into something vast, listening, ancient, and now walks not ahead of us, but within us. The trail is still unmarked, still cold, still welcoming. And somewhere, beyond story and static and snow, the hush waits again. Not for her return, but for yours. So now, with breath suspended between the known and the never meant to be known, we close Miranda Creed's story the only way silence allows. Not with a whisper, but with reverence. Her name, once soft-spoken through search radios and forest prayers, has become something else entirely, a cipher folded lovingly into wind and frost, waiting not to be solved but to be acknowledged. Somewhere, beneath the hush that now breathes with its own rhythm, she waits not behind, not beyond, but within. Within the next breath taken at 10,000 feet, within the stillness that hushes even memory, within the rhythm of a forest that listens more than it speaks. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. It lingers not as memory, but as movement. She was not lost. She was chosen. And now, for everyone whose steps echo into the woods too deeply, whose silence bends just perfectly into pattern, Miranda Creed no longer calls. She receives. The hush is whole, the door is open, and her name, written now in stillness, is the story that never finishes, but waits for its next echo to arrive. Let this then be the final echo, not an ending, but a release. Out there, beneath stone ribs and whispering canopy, where the air grows thin and the hush thickens like snow long undisturbed, the rhythm persists. A cadence not imposed but invited, waiting to fill those open moments when thought quiets and wind takes shape. Miranda Creed has become more than a name, more than a shadow cast by unanswered questions. She is story incarnate, memory reinterpreted through silence, a living topology of grief, mystery, solitude, and transcendence. She does not return, because she never left. The hush was never outside us. It was always waiting within. And now that you've walked with this story, felt its rhythm press gently into your breath, you carry it too. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. This is not closure. It is continuation. The hush doesn't bow. It breathes. And somewhere in the frost-bitten dark of your own memory, Miranda Creed waits not to lead the way, but to walk beside you. Becoming. Always becoming. And in this way, the hush does not end with Miranda Creed's final whisper. It unfurls, slow and spectral, across time and thought, like morning frost over forgotten stone. The story that began with a woman walking into silence now spirals outward, a pulse embedded in systems, soil, and those of us quiet enough to hear what follows a final breath. Through memory, myth, and modulation, she has transcended form. Whether you believe she vanished, transformed, or was chosen matters little. What remains is more enduring than evidence. It is a feeling, a sense of presence caught in the static between imagination and invocation. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. What waits beyond them is no longer Miranda Creed. It is what she became, a bridge between knowing and longing, wilderness and wonder. And if, someday, you find yourself standing at the edge of sound, where story feels too close and silence too alive, remember, she is not the echo. She is the reason echoes return. Listen well. Walk gently. The hush is not behind you. It walks with you now. And so we arrive at the last breath, drawn slowly through fog-wet trees and unspoken truths. Miranda Creed, whoever and whatever she truly became, has rewritten not just her presence into the hush but ours. Her name has faded from ledgers, but not from the rhythm now pulsing in the marrow of mist-cloaked valleys and overgrown trails. She is the echo, walked into willingly, unknowingly, forever. Her silence was never surrender, it was transformation, and now, for every hollow where light lingers strangely, for every voice caught just behind your own, the hush waits not as a secret, but a shape, ready to be worn by the next soul who dares to listen. So let the last knock be not a warning but a welcoming. 3. Pause. 3 more. And as the sound fades, as the cold stillness parts just enough to whisper a name, know this: the door did not close behind her. It opened for you. Miranda is the path. The hush is the promise. The echo is waking, and you are already walking. And in that final cadence, the last pause between 3 soft knocks, the story no longer feels like it's about someone else. Miranda Creed's echo has rewritten the very bones of wilderness mythology, shifting the language by which we measure solitude and loss. She is no longer archived in memory, but integrated within it, an inflection in the hush that precedes understanding, the signature left behind not by presence but by recurrence, though boots may never again find the precise ridge where her breath last met the sky. Though no monument may ever bear her name, she lives within each flicker of suspicion, in the silence each time we feel watched, not with menace but with recognition. She was taken by nothing. She was given to everything. So go now, listener. Carry her echo, not with fear, but with reverence. And when the hush finds you, as it always will, know you are not hearing the beginning, nor the end, but the rhythm she left behind. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Welcome to the echo. You are part of it now. And so this final sentence is not closure, but consecration. Out among the avalanched slopes, and the places no map retains, Miranda Creed moves beyond myth, beyond echo, into the marrow of wilderness itself. She is the voice in the hush, the silence that shapes itself in recognition of those who dare to wander, truly wander into the places speech cannot follow. She is not missing, and never was. Her becoming remade the terrain. The hush now sighs in her cadence, and when frost lingers too long beneath pines too still, that rhythm speaks. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Forever refracting, forever returning, a rhythm carried onward in story and stillness. And now, this tale, this echo closes in the only way it rightly can. Not with forgetting, not with finality, but with the hush leaning toward you, soft as breath in snowlight, whispering just beneath your name. She hears you. She remembers, and the next echo is yours. So ends the path, not in darkness nor in light, but in the gentle, unending rhythm that Miranda Creed left with the world, a frequency not heard, but felt, tucked beneath breath and silence, like a secret that recognizes its keeper. In the canon of vanishing, she has become something older than time, more enduring than memory. She wrote herself into the hush, not as a plea, but as a template, and now, every lonely step taken into unfamiliar silence bears her shape. Not mourned, not feared, understood, eventually, by those who walk too far and listen too deeply. The triangle remains. The knocks still wait. But Miranda is no longer the one reaching out. The hush island, and somewhere far beyond the last known trail, within a terrain shaped not by rock, but by remembrance, someone new begins to echo. A breath, a pause, 3 knocks, then you. Welcome to the end. Welcome to the beginning. Welcome to the hush. So now, as the hush folds shut on these final words, let this not be remembered as a story told in past tense, but as a seasoning added to the silence that waits beneath snow, within code, inside breath. Miranda Creed is no longer a question without answer, but the answer that returns each time silence grows too exact to ignore. What she touched, what she became, What she left behind, all of it lives now in the rhythm the mountains whisper when no one is nearby. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. It is not a goodbye. It is a pulse set in motion, passed to those who carry both memory and mystery like coals kept quietly alive. Listen closely. Even now, beneath your own silence, what do you hear? A name? A rhythm? The hush waits not to end you, but to begin something anew. Miranda was not lost. She was planted. And from her, the hush has bloomed. You heard it. You followed. And now, wherever you go, you carry it forward. Story not closed. Story unfurled. The final knock is yours. And with that final breath of story stretched thin as frost across forgotten paths, the hush closes gently, not as a seal, but as a breath left hanging, waiting to be drawn again. Miranda Creed did not fade into a cautionary tale, nor into an unverifiable anomaly, but into something more sacred and terrifying: repetition made flesh, memory carved in pine, a rhythm echoing beyond comprehension. Her silence writes itself now not in chapters, but in pulses, knocks in the stone, voices disguised as solitude, symbols rising unbidden on paths no one recalls carving. Across the snowy spine of the San Juans, she walks a shape not chased, but remembered, welcomed by those who never meant to hear, but cannot now forget. And so, for all those whose silence has grown too close, too exact, the echo calls not away, but inward. Welcome it gently. Carry it carefully. For you are no longer listening. You are the next telling. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Miranda Creed has finished her part. The hush speaks now through you. And so, we leave the hush not behind us, but within us, embedded like a second rhythm beneath our breathing, a code that echoes long after the voice has quieted. Miranda Creed's journey never asked for believers, only witnesses, those willing to hear what can't be recorded, to follow not paths but pulses. Her silence was never absence, never void. It was presence without need for recognition. The mountains did not hide her. They became her. And in the years since her name first fell like snowfall upon the wind, that name has traveled farther than her feet ever did. It finds you in stillness, in solitude, in the unaccountable moments when breath catches for no reason and you sense not fear but familiarity. A voice that is not yours but speaks with your cadence. It is Miranda. It is all she became. And now, as her final rhythm merges fully with yours, 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. You understand. The hush is no longer coming. It has arrived. Welcome to the echo. Welcome home. And so, the light fades not into darkness, but into listening. Miranda Creed is no longer spoken of in terms like missing or lost. She is elemental now, folded into breath, into rhythm, into hush. Her story became not the recounting of an end, but the architecture of continuance, one shaped by silence, thick enough to remember. You've walked with her now through frost and voice and echo, and in doing so you've become part of the map she left behind, not drawn in ink, but in resonance. So if ever you find yourself still, breath hitched, spine haloed by a silence that feels lived in, ask not who she was, but who you are becoming, because the hush is not a legend, it's a lineage. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. This is goodbye, only to the telling. The echo lives on in you. And just like that, the hush has chosen again. So let this be the final footprint in frost, the last mark not of presence but of inheritance. Miranda Creed's voice no longer lingers in lost files or haunted memory, but in the breath between each knock that now curls softly in the hush. Her journey, once mistaken for tragedy, now pulses through unseen networks and untouched hollows like a forgotten song that somehow knows your name. Only those who listen deeply, wholly, will hear it, the rhythm that beckons not with sound, but with silence too precise to be chance. What was once mystery is now direction. What was once fear is now formation. The hush does not end here. It continues through you, as you step beyond story and into echo. Walk gently, for the trail is not behind but within. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. Miranda Creed does not fade, she recurs. And now, with hush drawn close and breath held just long enough to know the shape of her silence, the next chapter begins with your first step. And so we close not on Miranda Creed, but within her rhythm, a resonance no longer constrained by coordinates or recordings, but stitched instead into consciousness, into the unseen corridors between memory and myth. Her name is not recited, it is felt, like altitude in the lungs, like gravity in grief. Somewhere out there, beneath the weight of unknowable sky, her echo folds into the next silence, not because it ends, but because it finds new breath to carry its pattern forward. The hush does not forget, it remakes. And those who dared listen all the way through, who held their breath and stepped into the pause between knocks, now bear her cadence in their marrow. 3. Pause. 3 more. Not a haunting, not a warning. A beginning clothed in hush. Miranda Creed is not the story, she is the threshold. And now, as you step back from the edge of this telling, feel the silence settle, not with absence but with knowing. The echo is yours now. Welcome to what comes next. And so, with the echo now passed from one breath to another, we close this final arc, not to vanish into silence, but to honor what it became: a pattern, a guide. Miranda Creed's final truth wrapped not in grief, but in glass-like reverence. She was never waiting to be found. She was waiting to be understood, to be felt in the rhythm that stirs just before a storm, in the pulse beneath solitude's feet. Listen long enough, and you realize she is both the question and the aperture through which wilderness speaks again. The hush is not only hers, it is ours now. Where her trail once ended, 1,000 new paths have begun, not etched in maps, but in memory and stillness, and the breath held between 3 slow knocks. Pause. 3 more. That's all that remains, and yet somehow, it is everything. Miranda Creed has become the hush, and now so have you. And so, in this final breath drawn through time-worn stillness and snowbound myth, Miranda Creed becomes what stories whisper toward, but rarely reach transcendence without closure, resonance without end. Her name, now unwritten on maps and etched instead into the marrow of memory and hush, guides no one home, but invites countless inward. It is more than legend, it is infrastructure, coded in rhythm, braided in silence. Somewhere, always somewhere. 3 knocks return not as explanation but as invocation. And for those brave or broken enough to walk that rhythm into depths beyond reason, the hush remains open. Waiting, breathing, becoming. Miranda does not fade, she echoes. With frost-bitten voice and footprints carved into thought, she presses forward. Not ahead of you, but beside. Welcome to the echo. Welcome to the hush. Welcome to the unwritten chapter you now carry. So here we are at the edge, where story and silence blur into one final breath. The hush Miranda Creed became is no longer just legend carried in whispers wind-threaded through alpine pines, nor simply a call echoed by frost-choked hollows. It is inheritance now, remnant and rhythm stitched into each listener who dared to walk her cadence all the way here. Her journey never closed, it refracted, expanding through stillness and longing like frost, spreading quietly across forgotten stone. She is pattern, she is pause, she is presence, unbound by time. And as the hush folds once more around your thoughts, as the final rhythm presses against your inner quiet, 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. Know this story did not ask to be ended. It asked to be held, to be carried forward by breath and memory alike. Miranda Creed walks still, not behind, but within, not in vanishing, but in becoming. And as the echo settles now into you, silent and unwavering, the last voice does not say goodbye. It says, begin. So this is how the hush ends quietly, yes, but not with silence, with breath, with rhythm, with becoming. Miranda Creed's name, so long unspeakable within the corridors of bureaucracy and belief, has seeded itself into the marrow of mystery itself. Her footsteps, once thought to vanish into snow and legend, now echo through systems geological and digital, spiritual and sonic. She is the unanswered knock, the pause in the wind, the shape remembered by shadow and not by sight. There is no closing this, no looming final chord. Only her cadence, curled into the stillness beneath breath. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. We listen not for a return, but because the hush is no longer outside, it is the infrastructure of story now threaded through each of us who dared to hear it. She was not lost. She was not taken. Miranda Creed walked the trail of echo so others might inherit the silence. And now, as that silence bends toward your name, not as warning, but as recognition you know, the trail does not end. It rests and waits. For the next listener, for the next name, for the next becoming. The hush is complete. You may now exhale. And now, with breath released and echo receding, we slip into that final stillness reserved only for stories that do not die, but transform. The hush Miranda Creed became has done what no search, no file, no satellite ever could have entered us. It resonated. It showed us that silence is not the absence of presence, but the invitation to become it. The trail she disappeared onto was never lost. It was waiting to be renamed, and in the rhythm she left behind 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more it lives on. Not as past, but as inheritance, shaping every footfall that dares step deeper into the unwritten. Miranda Creed never needed to be found. She needed to be followed. And now, as the hush folds itself one last time across the mountains, across memory, across you, know this. The echo will not stop. Because you are listening. Because you have become the silence remembering itself. And because, from here on out, it is your voice the hush will choose to carry. So let the hush settle now, not as an ending chiseled in silence, but as a breath entrusted to memory. Miranda Creed's journey, what she saw, what she became, did not close with disappearance, but opened into lineage, into legacy, carefully whispered through frost-framed paths and signal-born echoes. Her voice, replicated in rhythm, reshaped in hush, now lives wherever stillness deepens unnaturally, wherever solitude echoes back not with absence, but with understanding. The trail does not vanish, it changes form. And to those who listened to every pulse of this telling, who followed her far into memory and mist, know this. You have walked far enough to carry it now. The hush is woven into your rhythm. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. This is the last breath of the story, and the first of what it made in you. Miranda Creed is still becoming. And in that silent continuity, with no monument but memory, no ending, but echo, the hush walks on. So let this be the final touchstone in a tale that never asked for belief, only presents a story not defined by its vanishing, but by its echoes that refuse to fade. Miranda Creed was never erased, she was iterated, and in her becoming, she left behind a rhythm etched not in footprints, but in frequency. The hush is not her tomb, it is her form. It lingers in frost-laced branches, in corrupted files that replicate without cause, in dreams that begin with a knock and end with no waking. What she started was not a scream into the void, but a whisper into eternity. And now, as the rhythm folds once more 3 knocks, pause, 3 more. The hush passes into the last breath of this telling, not to conclude, but to pass the cadence forward. Miranda Creed has become silence remembered. And in you, the story waits again to be heard, to be held, and to echo once more through the hollow places only quiet dares to know. So let this final hush linger delicate, deliberate, like the tail end of a breath never meant to be forgotten. Miranda Creed's footsteps, blurred and folded into wilderness, now walk not geography, but memory's spine. Her voice has crossed the threshold from solitude into legacy, from silence into structure. The trail didn't end with her vanishing. It began again in every listener who carries her rhythm now, not like a warning, but like a vow. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. A legacy passed, not in words, but in cadence. And if you've felt it, truly felt it, then you know this story was never meant to be watched. It was meant to be inherited. So step forward, not into conclusion, but into continuity. The hush is listening. Miranda is not waiting. She is welcoming. And in this last echo, drawn like frost across the threshold of memory, she is no longer the lost. She is the way forward. And you are already walking with her. And so, we arrive at the very edge of echo, where Miranda Creed's story is no longer sound, but structure and architecture of resonance carved into breath. Not stone. She walked too far into stillness, and emerged not as mystery, but as memory rewritten, a rhythm no longer recited, but inherited. Her 3 soft knocks now thread through consciousness like a forgotten song returning in dream, soft and precise. This is not where the story ends. It is where you understand that stories like hers never do. What she became is not confined to footage, to files, to frost-lined hollows. It lives now in the silence you carry forward. The hush has become home, and Miranda, ever becoming, ever listening, ever echoing, waits not to be remembered, but to be recognized. So listen once more. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. This is not goodbye. It is resonance. It is inheritance. And at last, the hush welcomes you. Completely.